Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Continuously Refined. I'm Shayna.
And I'm Sicily.
Today, we're going to switch it up a little bit, and I am going to be quote unquote interviewing and asking Cicely questions about and kind of all revolving around mental health and her story. We're going to give some tips and tricks to help with mental health, depression, anxiety, and not just immediately turning to doctors to get prescribed medication, but some of those more natural ways that we have both found really, really help with it. And I think, again, we talk about it so often, but it is really your mental health, I think, is one of those things that really portrays how your body is all interconnected. So if one thing is off, it's going to lead to another and another. And our doctors don't like to do that. They like to focus in on one thing and prescribe it and move on. So we're really going to talk about that today. And we're excited to be back recording another episode.
Yeah, I was just telling Shannon, I feel like we haven't recorded in so long. Like even we've been getting episodes out, but I feel like we kind of recorded them in advance and whatever. So I'm excited. It feels like I'm in the guest seat on my own podcast today. But
Here we go. Yes,
yep.
Cicely doesn't really know what's coming question-wise, so it should be a fun one. Okay,
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted to start off with just giving our listeners kind of a brief overview of your journey with mental health, what that's looked like for you as you've grown up and over the years.
Yeah. Um, I think I've always had issues with mental health, and they've definitely stemmed from just different things when I was younger. And they really started, I got diagnosed with anxiety for the first time my sophomore year of high school. And it really started because I was just like realizing that there were so many things that I felt so out of like were out of my control, and I would like freak out about them. And so my mom one time like sophomore year, and I feel like I might have mentioned this story on the podcast before, but I can't remember. We were cleaning out my closet, and my I like if things weren't folded perfectly or if things weren't put back perfectly, I like was freaking out. And I would like unfold it, and then I ended up like throwing a fit and being like, I can't do any of this, like, that was just cleaning out a closet. Like not something that's not that big of a deal. And my mom mentioned to me, she was like, "Hey, like, have you ever thought about like maybe talking to someone, seeing someone, whatever?" And so I started seeing somebody sophomore year of high school, and I just started to realize all these patterns. And I think something with anxiety is you don't really realize that all the thoughts going through your head aren't thoughts that every single person has and aren't normal until someone else points it out for you. And so that was kind of my first experience with it was like, oh my gosh, like when I walk into the lunchroom every single day and I sit down at my lunch table in the exact same spot every day, I am convinced that my friends around me are going to want me to leave and want me to sit somewhere else. And what if they don't like the lunch I have that day or say something about it? Or what if I get there and my seat's gone? Or what if someone's like makes a side comment about my like me sitting there? And again, like that never ever happened. And I always sat in the exact same spot. But those were thoughts that would run through my head every day. And so it was things like that that I started to realize that I had anxiety. And I went back through my like anxiety journal that I've kept all the years of going to therapy now. And the things that made me anxious before, thankfully, don't make me anxious anymore. It's just evolved into new things. But they used to be things of even like I would try to plan so far in advance. And I think that that is the main thing with anxiety, right? Is like we want to be able to see the future and to foresee any problem that might happen. And so when I was running track in high school, I would have to get to practice at like 6 a.m. And so it was like, okay, well, am I going to be able to go to sleep in time to get enough rest? What am I going to eat in the morning? Because I still had issues with my stomach at the time. And so it was like, okay, then will I be hungry by third period already? And will I not eat? Like it was thoughts like that that would like run through my head literally all day. And so yeah, I started seeing a counselor, started to realize these thoughts and started to realize that they weren't normal thoughts and weren't things that every single person thought about every day, or necessarily went through. And since then, I have had like definitely an up and down journey with anxiety. Um, Even now, I'm so grateful that it doesn't impact me. It impacts me, I'm sure, in some way every single day, but it's not crippling every single day like it used to be. And I don't feel like my mind is 24/7 racing. It's only like certain times that it'll get worse and sometimes get better. But for the most part, it has gone a lot better. But that's kind of like the beginning journey of anxiety and all of that.
Yeah, can you speak towards kind of those like debilitating thoughts that just constantly like creeped up in your head and like it was about things that you couldn't necessarily control, but then how did once you like how did those hold you back in your day-to-day
Mhm.
life? Whether that was like not living in the moment or kind of being more sad all the time rather than, our natural like happiness. And then once you started seeing someone and like bringing attention to those thoughts, what changes did you see switch?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was it's so hard. Like anxiety in general is hard because especially when you start to like see someone or start to look into things, you you know these thoughts aren't true to an extent. Like you can tell yourself like, "Oh, I know that's not going to happen," but in your head, your brain is still wired and convinced that it is going to happen. And so when I would have these like crippling thoughts of just like, I'm trying to think of a example from high school, but even now, like it'll just be a thought of like the worst that could happen in a situation. And I'm can easily be like, that's just not gonna happen. Like today I babysat and I was also watching a puppy and I was like so anxious going to bed last night about it. And in the past, that would have kept me from going. So I would have come up with some excuse that I was sick and told the mom I couldn't make it anymore, or that I just like there would have been some reason and I would have just cut it off.
Mhm.
Because when I was first dealing with anxiety, that almost was the best way to handle it was just to not go and to not feel the anxiety 24/7. Whereas when I started seeing a counselor, I started kind of doing the opposite and I started facing the anxiety more. And it was in a controlled environment where I knew, like, okay, I'm only going to face this one thing this week and then this next thing the next week. And taking those thoughts that I've so heavily convinced myself of and just challenging them in some way and being like, okay, I know that this isn't going to happen. So I'm going to put myself in this situation to prove to my brain that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so cool too. And props to you to see how far you've come over the years. And like, that's so amazing and incredible. My next question is kind of like, at what point did you realize that you needed to take a different approach to healing? And so you'd always been seeing someone and it was a slow working progress. But at what point did you think, oh, maybe I need to integrate something else to help me battle this anxiety?
Yeah. Um, in high school, I think I was content with my like one counselor that I had been seeing, and he got me to a point my senior year where I was like, okay, I feel like he's given me the tools that he has, and that's kind of the best I can do. Um, and then at that point was when I started seeing my functional medicine doctor, and he was the first person to really bring up to me that my anxiety was controlling my life more. And when we started looking into stuff with my stomach, and I actually found and looked through the other day all the records, we had to fill out like 20 something pages of things when we saw him. And I found those pages and I was looking through, and there were so many neurological questions on there. And so I had to fill out everything about anxiety and seeing a therapist and things I had worked on and all of that. And that I think was the first time that someone pointed out to me that there was more to just my anxiety. We've talked about a million times the whole connection with the gut, and I know we'll talk about it more, but that was kind of, I was like, I need to focus on fixing another part to also help my anxiety. And it's not just things in my brain. And I had been told by doctors before, like, oh, your stomach hurts just because you're anxious. But that didn't carry any weight until I was old enough to actually process that. And then as a senior in high school, I was like, okay, I need to actually look at this. And then I also started seeing a different therapist, and she was the one that was really big on testing my anxiety and approaching it in a really like kind of aggressive manner and not so much of like a laid back, like just think about how you're feeling and like what your thoughts are. So that was probably the like first time that I kind of noticed that shift and started to look at it in a different way.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how our whole body is one and like you having to really hone in and focus on your thoughts and controlling those, but then also your gut and your stomach issues, which you would have assumed would have been two different things that you need to hit completely separately. But then once you got those tests done and you found your functional medicine doctor, it's really cool to see how he connected those. And
Mhm.
we've talked so much about it, but can you really explain again the connections that you've found personally in your health journey between your mental health and your overall gut health?
Yeah. I think I've even noticed recently, Rocco, Rocco's playing now. Um, but I think I've noticed recently even more so how tied me specifically they are. And yes, when I first started stuff with my stomach, I did have gut issues and I did have infections in my stomach and things like that. But I didn't like realize how tied to anxiety it was until more recently. Even as an example, um, when I went to Europe and I decided to come back a week early because I was really anxious over in Europe and like had the time of my life, but still was just like there's a lot of change. This is all new, all things I don't do well with. Because I've been like, this is kind of a side note, but because I've been seeing a therapist for like 8 years now, almost, I don't know, something like that. I can like I know my patterns with anxiety really well. And it is like helpful to call out. So when I was in Europe and I was super anxious, I knew like this is because everything around me is different and everything around me is changed. And I don't do well with
Hmm.
uncomfortability. Yeah, that
Yeah.
word. And so I was just like not doing great. But my stomach also like it wasn't bad, but I definitely was like, oh, like I thought I'd be able to eat gluten and dairy more over here and things like that. And I realized when I came back that if I had just focused more on controlling my anxiety and managing my anxiety more, not controlling, that's like a very poor way to put it, but managing my anxiety and managing my stress, that my stomach would have been a lot better. And even since being home this summer, when I start to have an off day with my stomach, the very first thing I do is manage my anxiety. And I do something to help my anxiety. And it used to be the complete opposite. It used to be the minute that I started feeling anxious was due to my stomach, and I would start taking something to help my stomach, or I would be like looking into every single thing I ate that day and looking at what might have hurt it, then cutting that out of the diet, even though that was something I ate every single day and was just fine with. And so personally, I've just seen just how connected that is and how much even changing my gut health and my microbiome helped my anxiety to go down. And that, I mean, I just kind of said, but that whole connection of like when I can tell that my anxiety gets worse, I can tell my stomach's also worse, and vice versa. When I know my stomach's bad, my anxiety is naturally going to get worse because I'm like stressed about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I was doing some research on like what you're talking about and how really the health of that gut of our gut microbiome plays such a huge role in regulating our mood, our
Mhm.
stress, and our anxiety. And it's something we never even think about. But really like we had talked about in one of our episodes that vagus nerve. And
Yes.
that is the connection, the direct connection between our gut and our brain is through the vagus nerve and through chemical messengers. And so I think it's really important here to like highlight if you're interested in that, go back and listen to the episode because we dive into everything that revolves around. And that was something I was very new about. I don't think it's talked a lot about our
Hmm.
parasympathetic nervous system and our vagus nerve, but there are things that you can do and little tricks to really help calm the nervous system so then it is able to move and can like your neurotransmitters are able to move and it's better, you'll have a better connection when you're calm. And it all something I found so interesting, so the gut bacteria produces your neurotransmitters, so your gut bacteria produces your serotonin, your dopamine, and your GABA, which is all directly connected to mood, anxiety, and how we feel stress.
Yeah.
And 90% of our body's serotonin is made in the gut. So if you have poor gut health, if you are not supporting it with good, healthy foods, you're going to have poor gut health. And that is going to decrease the amount of serotonin that your body is going to produce. It
Yeah.
also is like really connected with inflammation, which is a huge thing that we talk
Mhm.
about on our podcast, how our body gets inflamed when it is in an environment that it's not supposed to be in, whether you're eating poorly, not working out. And therefore, when your body's inflamed, it can't send messages back and forth, and it can't send the neurotransmitters. And so I think your story and your testament with how you've been managing both your gut health and your mental health is a perfect testament to the connection between it all.
Yeah, I think we talked about this some in the nervous system episode too, but even just a simple thing of anxiety, naturally your body lives in more of a fight or flight like kind of mentality, and that is something that especially over the past few months I'm like so trying to get my body out of. And when your body is in that mentality, your nervous system is constantly working and trying to like fight whatever it thinks the like fight part of your body like and your mind is. So even something like digestion when you're eating food isn't going to happen properly because your body is trying to work so hard at fighting out whatever this thing is because it thinks that you're in an unsafe spot because you've told your body that you're in that.
Yeah. It's
So I think that even like a connection like that, it's like it's just so insane how it all works and how connected it is. Cause I'm just like, if people told you, like, told everyone this, like, and you knew about this from a young age or just like things like that, like, it could have helped so much. And I'm sure it can still help so many people.
Yeah, which is why we love doing this podcast and just getting the word out there and finding an alternative way to solve these health issues rather than what our normal doctors would prescribe. Kind of going back towards your therapist and when you she was talk like walking you through how to manage your anxiety and the thoughts that would come up, how what were some practices that she gave you in order to manage and kind of let those thoughts go?
The all-time biggest thing that I do, I would say there's two. I would say one of the biggest things I had to learn how to do was this when you see a therapist, you kind of have to learn this, but talk about the way I was feeling. And even to my parents, like I had a therapy session one time at the very beginning of therapy with my mom and was able to like talk about things to her and to let someone else in. And now I would say all of my friends, all of my family, like around me, are very well attuned to my anxiety and know about it. And when I'm in an anxious situation or I'm feeling anxious about it, I can talk about it. And I think that that truly helps so much because one, you realize you're not alone in it. And then two, you realize that people are willing to help you and like be there and be like, okay, like I see how you're feeling. Like, how can we help? Or can we do something that helps? So I think that that helps a ton. The other thing that was really big at first was just simply like acknowledging the thoughts. So a big thing that I work on with my therapist now in the past couple years is neutralizing the anxiety and like neutralizing a thought. So the thoughts that I have in my head, they're not necessarily good, they're not necessarily bad, they're just neutral.
I
And
like
so,
that word,
yeah.
neutralize.
So when I feel anxiety or I feel like there's these things I can't control or I'm uncertain about the future, those are all neutral things. It's like, okay, that's just it's something that's happening. We're going to acknowledge it and I'm going to look at is it something I need to handle? Is it something I can control? Or is it something I can't control? And if it's something I can't control, then I just continue to bring up the thought and recognize it when it comes up and just tell myself to neutralize it and be like, that is an okay thought to have. It is normal to feel that way. I think that when you start looking into anxiety and if you've worked with someone for a while, you are super in tune with your body. And so now almost I'm too in tune with my body sometimes of like the minute that I start feeling sick, like I could probably tell you a couple days in advance. And the minute that I start feeling sad about something or anxious about something, I automatically just go into a spiral about it. And it's like those thoughts and like those feelings and emotions, like sad and anxious, aren't necessarily bad emotions in small extents. You
Mm,
shouldn't feel that way all the time, but
yeah.
those are normal emotions that God created and like we will
Mhm.
feel. I think anxiety is one that we more feel because of the world that we live in now, but being sad or being worried about things are very much so normal. And so normalizing and neutralizing, I think the thoughts are really important. As for like, I think on my own, I've done a lot of work into looking into kind of tangible things that you can do. Um, and so when I was first working with my new therapist, a big thing that we would do was distraction. And so that's one that like I definitely don't recommend to everybody, but I think at first it's really helpful of when you're having all these anxious thoughts or you're going into a spiral, turn on a 20-minute episode of on Netflix. Like I would watch 20 minutes of New Girl. That was always my go-to. Or 20 minutes of YouTube or listen to your favorite podcast for 20 minutes, whatever it is, do something to just change your thought, to like distract yourself from it as you get more comfortable with like, okay, I know I'm having this thought, like walking yourself through it, I think it can be really helpful to implement things like breath work, which we've talked about a lot. Even last night when I was really anxious falling asleep, like that's how I ended up falling asleep, was I just was like, okay, I'm gonna just focus on my breathing. Because when you're focusing on breath work, you can't think about anything else. Like that's all you're thinking about.
Yeah. What
Um,
technique did you use?
I did, I wish I knew what it was called, but it's the one that my functional medicine told me to do, where you like inhale as much as you think you can, and then you inhale like a little bit more, and
Yep.
then exhale for like twice as long than your inhales were.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is proven to, I again don't know the name of it, but I'll look it up and we can put it in the description. It's proven to be the most effective for calming down your vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system the fastest.
Yep, and kind of like releasing stress. That's one of the practices that we do a lot in yoga. So when you
Yes.
exhale for longer than you inhale, you are signaling to your body that it is in a safe environment and that it can relax. So
Yeah.
that's really cool that it can be used in so many different practices. So you had kind of said breath work, distraction. Is there anything else that you found helpful?
I think meditation is a really helpful one. I'm not good about staying consistent with it, and it's one that it's so hard for people to start, me included, and I don't know why, especially when it's like, okay, it's 5 minutes. Like
Hmm.
5 minutes is three reels on Instagram. It's three TikTok videos. Like 5 minutes is not long at all. And so when you look up a quick meditation, you truly will feel a lot better after. I will stress though that like with anxiety and with spiraling, distraction I think is the only way to get you out of like distraction or talking to someone about what you're feeling in that moment out of like a true anxiety attack or like downward spiral. But after the fact, I think it's really helpful to do breath work and meditation when you're kind of coming out of that or like you're finally able to regulate yourself a little bit more and be like, okay, I'm not dying. I'm not whatever I thought I was. Like, I'll be okay. And then doing that because the breath work and meditation will calm your entire body down a lot faster than if you just kind of let it go after like giving yourself so much stress and spiking your cortisol and all of that.
Yes. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there are different levels of anxiety and there's different
Definitely.
times that it will hit you about different things. And so based on what you're experiencing and the different type of anxiety, you can then use a different type of practice, whether that is breath work or distraction to immediately get out a really big anxiety attack or practicing kind of what I'm hearing you say is like meditation could be a practice that someone would implement every single day or a few times a week, just consistently to kind of decrease the chances of maybe having another anxiety attack or be more in tuned and relaxed.
Yes. Yeah, because I think it keeps your mind a lot more clear and when you're present in the moment, it's really hard to be super anxious about the future. And
Mm,
so when you're just sitting and you're letting your thoughts run wild, you're going to naturally go that route. Something else that I think I don't know which therapist taught me this, but I've talked about on here a couple times. If you can't be thankful and anxious at the same time. So if you are in an anxious moment and you just name three things you're grateful for to yourself, then your mind will automatically switch. So even lately, like that's a perspective change I've tried to have of like for example, last night I was like, okay, I'm really anxious about nannying today because I also have to watch a puppy, and anyone that knows me knows I'm not really a dog person. Um, but I flipped that and was like, oh, like hanging out with dogs can be so good for your mental health and like puppies especially. And a cute little lab puppy is probably going to be adorable. And I like do really love little puppies. And so that'll be really sweet. Like immediately being more thankful then just is like, okay, it allows your body to feel like I can be safe in this moment. Like there are things about this that are good and it's not all bad. So I would say that that's another, I don't know what question I went off on there,
Yeah,
but that's
practices.
another
Yeah,
thing.
no,
Yep.
totally. I think being grateful is one of my favorite things. I can't remember where it was the first time I heard it. It must have been a speaker event, but it can truly transform your entire thought process and the entire way that you think about things. If you are grateful for a situation, grateful for people, grateful for whatever it is, I mean, it changes your day-to-day life. I
Yeah.
think you're just such a happier person and you're living in the moment. I think you touched on that too, which is so important because life
Hmm.
does go by really, really fast.
Yeah.
Something I had was talking to one of my friends last week who had battled with anxiety in high school. And so here's another tip that I wanted to share kind of to our listeners. There's a book called Switch on Your Brain by Caroline Leaf. And paired with that book is a 21-day brain detox to rewire your thinking patterns. And so, like you had mentioned, there's totally different types of anxiety, depression, and everyone needs something different. But this was something that really, really worked for her. And she had kind of experienced this constant anxious thoughts that were kind of revolved around the same thing. So she did this 21-day brain detox. And it's the idea, the whole book is about the idea that our thoughts shape our brains and ultimately our lives. So going all the way back to starting out at those ideas. We're not victims of biology, but rather our choices and thinking patterns then affect all of our mental, emotional, and even physical health. And so I just want to like pitch out that book that I had heard about. Switch on your brain if you are interested in doing that. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of thinking. It is taking in your thoughts and then
Hmm.
like acknowledging they're there, thinking about it, and then rewiring it. And that's something I don't have a lot of practice with, but I wanted to put out there because she says incredible things about it.
I would say even that's something that's hard with anxiety and working through it is you're gonna have to. I talked about with one of my friends about this recently, because she was finally seeing a therapist about something, and she was like, "I'm almost feeling it more now because you're diving into it." And so, when I always talk about like anxiety is not linear at all. Like it spikes and it goes up and down, but also like the quote unquote like healing journey with anxiety is just like that too, because one, changes in your life are going to cause more anxiety and less anxiety, and that's just the nature of life. But two, when you first start diving into anxiety and when you first start diving into healing any mental health issue, you have to get into it. And like it's the same thing with stuff with our stomach and with our health and hormones. We had to fully really just dive into it and almost let it get worse and get overwhelming at first before it got better. And so that's something when you really start to look into anxiety, it's like, oh, well, this sucks because now I feel like I'm feeling it to like the 10th degree, but it will get better. And it does.
Yeah.
I also am reading a book right now that I honestly would recommend to literally anybody, just in general, called Person in Progress. And I know Shayna, I mentioned it to you. I'm like, I think like 60 pages in, maybe, so like a couple chapters, but it is so, so good so far. Like, I have been highlighting and I highlight like at least 3 sentences on every page. And I'm like, all right, this is maybe too much because I'm not going to come back and look at like this many sentences.
But
Um,
good
but
wisdom.
yes, it's all about the like psychology of your 20s and how we're people in progress and we have all these different things, but it's helping me to rewire some of my thoughts because you don't really realize, I think, how many thoughts you've just been told to follow all of your life and like, oh, you do this or you take this risk or you don't take this risk and then you enter your 20s and it's like, okay, now I have all these things, but that's
Good
another
luck.
book that has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we do or we can have control over our thoughts.
Yes.
And it might not come natural to everybody, and others might have to work harder to do that, but we can control them if
Yeah.
we put in the work and the practice. And so I think it's really cool to see like your journey and how far you've come and the different things that you've implemented
Thank
over
you.
the last 8 years from when you first noticed it. I think we gave our listeners quite a few strategies and practices that hopefully they can implement to reduce their stress and heal anxiety. And also, if you're more interested, go back and listen to that episode that we had talked about. It's been a while. It has to be back like at least 10 or 15 episodes,
Yeah, it
um,
does.
all about parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah. Shannon, I have a question for you
Okay, let
that
me hear
I
it.
was thinking about. Um, as someone that maybe didn't know a ton about anxiety or started to learn more because you were friends with quite a few people that had a lot of anxiety in college. What were some of the things that surprised you the most at first, or that you learned about even how, as someone that's listening that doesn't have anxiety, but that is a friend to someone that does, how
Hmm.
to maybe help your friend, or just kind of things that you didn't expect, or like what was your thought process like there?
Yeah. And I'd say, like, throughout my life, I have been very blessed to not have dealt with a lot of anxiety or racing thoughts. I think I can manage them pretty well in changing those thought processes when they do come up. And so I'd say, like, one of the first things that I'd probably noticed was when you had, like, we had had an open conversation about it our freshman year. And I think I go back to like how special our college friends are. But it was like the first time in my life that we had had open conversations about our feelings and like what we were going through. I feel like in high school and the way that our society wants us to be raised, everything's very hush hush, quiet, behind closed doors. Like you would go through that all on your own. And at the beginning, like honestly, when you first shared it with me, I still like will blatantly tell you, like, I do not know how to relate to you. Like I
Yeah.
have never experienced that before. And so sometimes it's really, really hard for me to be empathetic with other people because if I haven't experienced it, I don't know how to help or how to react. And so when you first told me, I kind of thought like, oh, well, that's just easy. Just don't think about it. Like, oh, that's easy. Like, just tell yourself it's not going to happen. But then the more that we had conversations, I think it really opened my eyes to seeing like how anxiety and thoughts can have a hold on other people. And so I'm really grateful for our friendship and the open conversations that we were able to have. Me asking like, hey, what can I do? And I started to tell patterns. Like as a friend, like you start to notice patterns around people. And so if you were more distant for a few days or you were quieter, I'd be like, "Hey, what's up? Like how like can I pray for you?" And it's not even like you have to
Mhm.
tell me everything about it, but I think that's a good tip to give people out there and just to be a good friend that you don't always have to have the right thing to say. You don't have to have a solution to fix the problem. But hey, I'm here if you want to talk and I'm here to listen and I will be praying for you. And so I think that shift, I mean, it probably took me the solid 3.5, 4 years of all of college for me to get to being like, what in the world is anxiety? And then
Mhm.
trying to be a really good friend about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said something really good too about like people feeling like they don't need to necessarily understand it, but there's still things you can do if you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Especially as a friend and like just understanding that. Rocco, go away. He like wants to sit right on the microphone.
Yeah, nice. Nice, nice.
Okay, I think we answered most of the questions that people have asked for us. We talked a lot about kind of how stress impacts us and our nervous system. One that we got was kind of around just taking anxiety medication. And Shane and I say this all the time, but we're not doctors. However, for myself, I personally have never looked into anxiety medications because I know there's other ways that I can heal my anxiety. And I also know that there's natural ways that I can heal my anxiety and natural supplements that I can take, which I can get into in a second. But I'll let Shayna comment on that question too.
Yeah, I think if you've been listening to our podcast or know, I mean, our MO is always we're going to try everything possible in the natural route to go before we turn to medication.
Yeah.
Um, God created our bodies, and I truly believe that they have the ability to solve almost everything with a little aid of what God put on this body or on this
Mhm.
earth to then heal our bodies. And now there's different levels of anxiety and depression, and it happens a lot with like chemical imbalances. And so it's not hard if you are experiencing this before you immediately take a anxiety medication to get some blood work done and really focus in on the levels that are in your brain. And it might be as simple as taking one or two natural supplements
Yeah.
or changing your diet a little bit to get your chemicals, the chemicals in your brain balanced a little more. And I think starting that off can really help, and you'll see a tremendous, tremendous impact before jumping into medication. Again, we're
Yeah.
not doctors. If medication is what is required, I just think it's really cool to hear another side and another perspective to heal your body and not just mask a symptom.
Yeah, definitely. And so we've kind of mentioned those like natural supplements for anxiety a little bit more. And I wanted to talk about a couple that I haven't necessarily taken all of these or done all of these, but I do know that some of these help. So ashwagandha is definitely one. I haven't specifically taken an ashwagandha supplement before, but it is in the like non-alcoholic social seltzers that
Ulcers.
we'll have. Yep.
Yeah, that's what
And
I was gonna
so
say.
those will automatically kind of calm and relax you, and you can definitely tell.
I
Uh,
notice immediately within
yeah,
like 10 to 15 minutes of me taking my first sip of one of the non-alcoholic, like you would call social seltzers, because they
that's what
do
they're
have,
technically. Yeah,
yeah, they have a little like, oh, I'm floating on cloud nine. It's nothing
yeah.
intense.
No.
But the ashwagandha, you can tell. I did
hmm
have a friend who took ashwagandha and it made her really, really sick. So if you're gonna start it,
hmm
do it in very small doses and then
Yeah,
increase your dosage as you go on, which is similar. I think doctors would say that about any supplement that you're starting.
definitely. Magnesium is one. I take magnesium every day,
We
and I definitely
love
have seen.
magnesium. It
Yep,
literally
it's great.
it'll solve all of your issues.
It honestly will, and there's so many different types of
There are
magnesium.
different
So if you
types.
have a lot of issues or even headaches or different things, like looking at magnesium is one of the first things for sure.
Yeah.
And even like a magnesium like spray on the bottom of your feet or like things like that can help calm you down a lot. Kind of going with that, lavender can be one that helps some as like an essential oil. And so that's one that I'll use a lot. I'll like mix it with my lotion and put it on, or I'll even just use my diffuser with lavender. I find that
My
that is just
favorite.
super calming.
Yeah.
Some of the others that Google has told us about that I haven't really looked into as much, but lemon balm and chamomile are apparently also really good. I have heard about kava as one too. Have not ever tried that one. My other recommendations would be L-theanine. I have taken an L-theanine supplement before, and I know that that's also in a lot of the social seltzers. And
Yes.
vitamin D. That is like such a big one. Vitamin D and vitamin B, I think, are really big ones that if you are feeling really anxious, they can be levels that are off for you that you might want to look into. So, especially if you live somewhere in the winter where it gets cold, I think vitamin D can definitely help. I mean, we've talked about the sun
The
and how
sun.
that helps your body and
Yep.
improves your mood. And so, naturally, it all cycles together.
Yeah, I think these are really awesome ones to kind of aid with those anxiety symptoms. If you're interested in taking the natural route, definitely recommend these natural herb remedies, as well as get, like, if you really are experiencing depression, go get that blood work test and
Yeah.
have a doctor run through it and see the levels that you could be deficient in.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's kind of all we have for you guys today, but I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I hope you were able to learn something or it was just a good listen. But we'll be back again in another 2 weeks. Bye.
Yes. Bye.